Hello, it's the 26th of February. I am TUNJI Andrews and you're watching Business Nigeria. The discourse on the state of the economy has gone on for too long. Now, social media platforms going agog with what is structurally wrong with the system, but not much is being said about what needs to be done. Every average Nigerian now is aware of what the problem is, especially as it affects every person, and it's biting hard. Today on Business Nigeria, we want to talk about solutions. And we've brought together three of the brightest Nigerian minds. Economist Dr. Ayo Teriba of Economic Associates, he's the CEO. He says attracting FDIs and more privatization is the way forward. Ugodree Obi-Chukwu, publisher of Nairametrics, is of the opinion that devaluation is a subjective policy that is anti-market. And Damilola Akinbami, financial derivatives economist, says allow the market determine its fair value. All three with us in the studio for a session. We tagged Economists. Where are your solutions? But first, your business news with Michael.
Thank you very much, TUNJI. And now for the stories making headlines today. The largest African crude producer is on the verge of another round of petrol shortages due to the abrupt decline in oil prices. Traders and local sources have attributed inability to access dollars as a major factor, while the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, has not been able to sign agreements quickly enough to exchange crude oil for products. Electricity consumers continue to groan over the recent plunge in power supply, with power generation sliding to 3,697 megawatts as against the peak of 5,074 megawatts achieved earlier this month. The International Monetary Fund says the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, needs to devalue the naira by adjusting the official exchange rate of 199 naira to $1 to a more market-determined exchange rate. This is in huge contrast with President Buhari's stand on naira devaluation. Back to you now, TUNJI.
Thanks, Michael. Now, Dr. Ayo Teriba, Economic Associates CEO, Ugodree Obi-Chukwu, publisher of Nairametrics and an economist, an economic commentator, as well as Damilola Akinbami, financial derivatives economist, all join me in the studio today for a roundtable discussion we call Economists, Where Are Your Solutions? Now, basically, we got the economists in the studio basically because we believe that it is time to start talking solutions. So many people have tried to analyze what the issues are. And I mean, they've talked and talked and talked, but we're going to start talking solutions. I'm going to start with Dr. Teriba. I've been reading through your views, and I believe you spoke about the fact that one of the issues to affecting the value of the naira is that we've not been able to attract FDI into critical sectors, infrastructure sectors of the economy. Now, my question is, seeing that we've done a bit of that with China, in terms of China coming into our infrastructure space, could you basically give us an explanation, maybe elaborate so that we can totally understand that?
Right. The reason we have a problem with the exchange rate is because of shortfall in supply. Nigeria got used to sitting down and waiting for oil revenue to arrive as the primary means of funding the foreign exchange market. With the fall in price from over $100 a barrel in recent years to about $30 a barrel now, we know that the oil revenue is not going to deliver enough forex supply.
True.
So the question is, what else can we do? Yeah, countries that have strong reserve base don't rely on export revenue alone. And I give example of China. China also receives a lot of FDI inflows. I speak of even the US, India, And apart from FDI inflows, China and India also gets a lot from diaspora remittances. Last year, they got about 30 billion each from diaspora remittances. So Nigerian government concentrates only on oil, totally ignores the need for the government to attract FDI into what is currently, public sector businesses. Money from China is not FDI.
It's a loan.
What's the point is that government needs to break its own monopoly in infrastructure sectors.
I think we're going to come back to that.
As long as real is government monopoly, China is perhaps giving them loan. China is not acquiring equity. So FDI is equity ownership.
As an investment of their own, as against the Nigerian government saying,
borrowing,
come and help us to do this. I get that. But Ugodree, let's come to you now. Doesn't that point to an inefficiency to the economy as a whole, as against just a specific flow of dollars into the economy?
Well, Nigeria as a whole, the economy has been inefficient for the last 4 or 5 years, and even when we do attract foreign investment, we always tend to attract the wrong kind of foreign investment. Over the last 5 years, you've seen more of FPIs than FDIs. So if you look at, total foreign investment that's coming to the country, you're seeing like 80 to 20 FPI over FDIs. And then FPIs don't develop your economy at all, and that's basically what he's trying to say. So, but with FDIs, you actually have people who, one, are investing in, choice sectors in your economy. They're bringing their money for the long haul. Or you have guys who are investing in existing businesses already, businesses that already exist in your economy. For example, probably existing in rail, or they're taking equity in maybe the upstream of the power sector, or the downstream or midstream, or they're investing in the oil and gas business, but they have that money in there for the long haul. So, but we haven't been able to create an environment for us to actually attract that kind of FDI. So it's either because we probably have, infrastructures are in decay. There's really no incentive. Yeah, it's the market-based economy. For that reason, all investors just see this is where you can just bring in money,
and quickly
sell,
make some money and get it out.
And then
so
exit
I was going to ask you, because you spoke about the monopoly, and then I might want to bring you to the exclusive list which the federal government holds. There are certain things that only the government is allowed to play in. So we talked about rail, for instance. Seaports also is another issue. You find out places like, for instance, the only working, properly functional seaport we have in Nigeria is the one in Lagos, while we have so many other waterways all around the country. How do we break that exclusive list without disrupting the system we have now?
Right. Telecoms is on the exclusive list.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it hasn't stopped the government
from
licensing private players. Okay. The fact that the federal government has the exclusive legislative right does not mean that the federal government has to operate it by itself. So federal government can do in rail what they have done in telecoms. Break their own monopoly. Open the space for investors to come in and play. I'm not saying do PPP. As long as you are still saying PPP, government monopoly remains. So it's not PPP, it's foreign direct investment. And another contrast between foreign portfolio investment and foreign direct investment is that foreign portfolio investment, as a matter of fact, is not investment. It is savings. Fully reversible. It comes in when you don't need it. It goes out when you need it. Whereas foreign direct investment is investment.
Yes.
Once it is done, it is not reversible.
It just remains there.
So all the investment you have in telecoms cannot be reversed.
Yeah.
The most that can happen is that specific investors can sell their stake
and they move on
to others, like Econet, that was part of the initial bid.
Yeah.
The brand of one of the operators has left. But the investment they made then
remains
still there, because they will only sell their stake to another party.
Well, let me come to Dami now. I mean, we see that as a structural inefficiency here, and the starting point would be where for you? I mean, looking at the economy right now, I was reading a quote today, and it said, especially when it comes to infrastructure development, 0 to 1 is actually a lot harder than doing from 1 to 5, because the startup phases are usually very hard. But where would be the starting point for you?
Well, for me right now, you can't do everything. So the government has to actually identify the priority sectors.
Pick its battles.
Yes, pick its battles, basically, because even if you get investment, where are you going to channel it into? What kind of infrastructure are you going to focus on? Are you going to do rail? Are you going to do road? Are you going to build the health sector? Are you going to build the education sector? So for me, I think the government needs to identify what are some quick wins, basically. So if you're going to focus on maybe education, transport, and health, at least that you need good roads and transport system to get.
But which one of them do you think would be the first point that could build the other ones?
Well, you see, you can't really say this is the first or this is the second.
I would like to say.
Okay.
I think
No, because you can.
Damilola,
Okay, because
I would like to say.
I would explain this way, because first, obviously, you need schools. You need a good health system. If you're not healthy, you can't go to school. If you're not well educated, you can't build the roads. So if you actually want to box me in a corner and
chicken
ask
and egg.
for
Chicken and egg. Dr. Teriba, what do you say?
Right. I think that the clear priority that government needs to resolve are those sectors that are killing the other sectors. That the ill health of those sectors constitute ill health
to the other sectors.
All other sectors, those are the ones you should fix first. One, transportation costs kill businesses in Nigeria. The reason why discussions about import substitution or export promotion may be lip service, may be just wishful thinking, building castles in the air, is that as long as haulage is by road for so long, will Nigerian economy be uncompetitive. You don't do haulage, large-scale haulage by road.
Where you have tankers taking it all the way from Lagos to Kano.
When the colonial regime arrived in Nigeria, Nigeria had no roads. We only had footpaths and waterways. Their first priority was to build a nationwide rail network. That's what Nigeria should do first. If you don't do that, you can't do anything else.
You've heard that.
Even agriculture is not going to be competitive.
Until you have
Next to that, disruptions to energy supply kills Nigerian economy. It's not good for anyone. Nigeria has crude oil, cannot refine it. Nigeria has gas, cannot distribute it. Nigeria has gas, yet power generating companies don't get gas. So the second body is, next to rail transportation, energy. Fix energy supply, however you want to do it. If you do those two things,
everything else will build up.
Will be unleashed. Things will happen. Manufacturing will grow. Agri will become more competitive. Then you will find that import substitution will happen.
Naturally.
And exports will be promoted, because if your costs, those system-wide costs go down, you will compete with Morocco. Yeah, you will need to import. You will not need to import, because the cost of producing locally will mean that it doesn't make sense
for you to do that.
To import it.
All right, thank you very much. We're going on a short break, and when we return, we'll still be talking with our guests in the studio. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The presidency is set to hold a major national economic conference in March to find solutions to the current state of the economy. While this might not be the same, it is, however, still solutions driven. Still on the show with me is Dr. Ayo Teriba, Economic Associate CEO, Ugodree Obi-Chukwu, publisher of Nairametrics and an economic commentator. We also have Damilola Akinbami, a financial derivatives economist. Thanks for staying with us. Let me come with to Dami immediately, because I want us to briefly touch the issue of devaluation, not devaluation. I saw maybe your comments coming out from FDC, and there was the discourse about possibly maybe looking at 20% adjustment and then removal of controls. And I mean, it did confuse me a bit. So maybe you could shed a bit more light into what you would do to the situation of the supply, in terms of supply for dollars at this particular time and the rising exchange rate.
Oh, let me start from the bottom. If you are looking at addressing the supply issue, the major source of forex for Nigeria is oil. And the Nigerian government cannot determine the direction of oil price, so it's an exogenous thing, so you really can't do much about it. But look at your other sources of forex. You look at investments. We've already talked about investments. So for investments to come in, you have to create an enabling environment. So I'm not going to dwell much on that. Also look at even diaspora funds. So these are some of the things that you can do to bring in some, at least to help or aid the supply of forex.
To ease this supply.
Yes. So in terms of our stance on what the government should do, we're actually advocating for a managed floating regime. And by that, that's what we're saying, allow market forces to determine the true value. And if you have a managed floating regime, it gives you that flexibility. So there's a lot of talk about devalue or no devalue. We're saying, why don't you adjust the currency? By adjustment, it can go upwards, it can go downwards. So if you have a band, when things depreciate or deteriorate further, so for instance, if oil prices fall to as low as $20, you have, the CBN can intervene and, okay, fine, let's allow the Naira slide a little bit. And when things improve, you can actually
adjust backwards.
Exactly, you can adjust backwards. So we shouldn't just be fixated on a number or be fixated on a particular policy that this is how it should be. You need to be flexible. So that's our stance, that why don't you have a band, and it gives you a little room to actually wriggle around.
I'll come to Dr. Teriba, but I want to get quickly to Ugodree. Ugodree, your words exactly, and I'm quoting you, you said, devaluation will not work. It's never been a reasonable solution to our currency woes. Explain to us.
Okay, what's the problem we have? The problem we have is we have a currency that for the last 30, 40 years has always been chasing after the dollar. So what it means is, and the way the fabric of your economy is built, it can't always strengthen against the dollar. I mean, I hear you say you can adjust upwards or downwards, but you know what? You actually can't adjust upwards. It's usually downwards. So if you adjust today to 250, I don't see you going back to 220. It hardly happens. I'm not even sure it's ever happened. So devaluation is not the answer. The answer to our currency woes is we probably need to look at the demand side of things. I mean, we already know what the problem is with our supply side. We rely a lot on oil, so to really increase supply, then it means there are a lot of things we need to do in our economy which are more long-term or medium to long-term in nature. So then, but on the demand side, there's probably a few things that we can do, to also reduce the demand and the pressure on the currency. And if you think, I mean, I support, floating the currency, but I mean, that also has its own negative consequences. I mean, floating the currency means inflation is going to go up. We've seen what happened just last week when, there was this yo-yo on the Naira, 300, 400, and even guys who are selling pure water increased the price of pure water. Everybody who had nothing to do, with the exchange rate basically just increases prices. So, it has its own, negative consequences on the economy as a whole. So to me, I think what the discourse should actually be is what can we do, right, on the demand side to, I don't want to use the word control, but at least to sort of have a grip on the value of our currencies.
Dr. Teriba, I mean, a lot has been blamed on our taste. People have tagged it irresponsible demand in terms of the kind of demands we tend to the imports, basically, from outside Nigeria. And a lot of people have blamed the pressure on the Naira on Nigerians' taste for foreign goods. Do you agree? And maybe you could also tie in your solution for the FX situation too.
Yeah, I'd want to.
Leave that to the side.
That's where I want to start from.
Okay.
The suggestion that you could adjust upward when necessary,
or
and downward when necessary. Then the suggestion to float. Let's acknowledge that at this time, there is a foreign exchange supply crisis in the country. And a time of crisis is not when you float your currency.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. If we were talking of the build-up from 2004 to 2008, when reserves rose from below 10 billion US dollars
to over 60
billion US dollars. If you float it, at that time, it will be stable. The currency will be stable. But in the wake of the global crisis, oil price fell from a peak of $150 to $45. We got devaluation. So that time of crisis is not the right time to float. If you float at that time, you kill the currency. You've seen what happened on the parallel market in the past few days. It has, you know, with the premium widening, the rate had gone to about 400, and then 2-3 days ago, dropped sharply to 250. So it tells you that what you have is volatility. Somehow, you got the premium widened to 25% after it had gone to 300%. So, and that tells you that we are dealing with a supply issue, difficulty. And the thing you solve, I don't think we are dealing with a valuation problem. The thing you solve is that supply shortage. And the way to solve it is you look for the money. There's no investment environment.
But those are long-term solutions.
No, it's not.
Where are you going to find the money?
Can I make my point? Sure. It's not long-term.
It's short-term.
Last month, yes, Saudi Arabia, in a similar situation, offered 10% of Aramco in an IPO.
Yes, yes.
Which they haven't consummated yet.
Which banks, you know, fell over themselves. So how is that long term?
They were mulling an offer, so they haven't offered it.
No. How is that long term?
So you actually haven't done that deal yet.
There are things you can do that can bring money in. Now, then I don't particularly, you know, share the view about restraining demand. It's a free market economy. You shouldn't be telling people, you know, what to import or what not to import. I think we should emphasize more. I don't think we are dealing with a trade problem, you know, because when the premium was widening, people were suggesting it's because of frivolous demand for imports.
Yes, yes.
So are you saying that in the past 3 days, when the premium narrowed, our demand for import has reduced? So I think we are dealing with purely a capital flow challenge. And Nigeria should respect the need to turn this jurisdiction to one that is attractive to capital inflow, that you can attract foreign currency into this jurisdiction and it will stay. Our import is 10% of GDP. Only 1/3 of it is consumption.
Yes, that is true.
The other third are inputs. You know, the other third, petroleum products. So 10% of GDP, that's 10 trillion. 1/3, that's 3.3 trillion, is import. Consumption is about 70 trillion. So import as a fraction of consumption, the consumer imports as a fraction of consumption is about 5%. Some people begin to say, you know, so I don't share the view that we are an import.
I'm going to ask everyone what they believe the appropriate value of the Naira is. But I'm going to start with you, Ugodree, because I want to bring you up on something. There was a tweet storm you did, and in it you spoke about SAP. That's a structural adjustment program that we had in the 80s. And you spoke about it as somewhat of a negative light. I don't think you agreed with the structures of this structural adjustment program. Now, I wanted to point out that, I mean, we know what the structural adjustment program is. It's an IMF policy in which you try to build smaller economies and reduce government intervention. Why exactly were you against structural adjustment program?
Well, I mean, it wasn't like I was, against it. It's just that I tend to be very circumspect when it comes to, policies from the IMF. And the reason is that, IMF policies are good, but then you as, as an economy or as a country, in sub-Saharan Africa, you have to ask yourself, are these policies actually favorable? Does it help you achieve your long-term goals? You look at other countries that have actually, applied some of those policies. What is their, political framework like? Is it the same as yours? What's the complexity of the country like? Is it the same as yours? So you really have to check those things before you start to, bite that bullet. And I've looked at a lot of countries that have actually also adopted, some of these stringent IMF policies, and it actually hasn't worked for them. So, so that's why I just tend to look at it, when I see, them coming again and sending all sorts of policy guidelines, I tend to be very circumspect. I'm like, you know what, just hold on. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I also don't like a government that just takes it hook, hook, line, and sinker.
All right, so I'm going to start with Dr. Teriba. What do you think is the appropriate value of the Naira? It's between 197 Naira on the interbank market, and as at this morning, we're hearing between 330 on the parallel market. So where is the appropriate price? Where's the equilibrium?
The appropriate value of the Naira is dependent on the balance of demand and supply.
Okay.
Nigeria, as a country, needs to do more in strengthening the supply. We see the extent to which countries like India go to attract foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment in key infrastructure sectors in India now, the limit has gone up, whether solid minerals or rail, has gone up to 100%. India used to be very distrustful of FDI. Now they have seen that FDI is good for India and that much of their fears, security and all, were unfounded. Nigeria needs to join that group. Indian government judges its own performance by how many billion US dollars it has attracted into India in terms of foreign investment. Indian government reaches out to its diaspora and say to them, come and save at home in hard currency. Yeah. And they mobilize a lot. So Nigerian government should do that. If Nigerian government does that, that you don't just need investment inflows as private sector to private sector inflows, that you actually begin to attract private sector to public sector inflows, then the appropriate price of the Naira will probably be lower than 197.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Jami.
Well, first I want to say that there are two markets that are involved now. You have the 199 market, which is heavily subsidized. You have the 350 or 330, whatever the figure is, which is artificial. Yes, and I want to state that, again, our stance is actually have a managed float, not floating your currency totally. A managed float gives you that flexibility, and it allows market forces. So if things, we've all been talking about demand and supply. He was saying, okay, fine, maybe address demand. And like he said, obviously, you can't tell me what to consume. Do you understand? But we all have a budget constraint. If I have 1,000 Naira as my income and you increase the price, it's either I reduce my demand or there's going to be a reallocation. I spend less on something and maybe consume more something. So you can't control that. So why don't you allow the forces to determine and be a little bit flexible? So now within that 199 and 350, I would use this, what we call in World Economics call purchasing power parity. It's actually a crude form of determining the true value of the currency. So you use a basket of various items. You compare the price with the price in New York.
If you could just put the basket in your mind.
So we did our analysis and we came up with around 236.
236
Naira. Yes, 236 Naira to $1. So that's a crude form. So I would say the Naira, its true form or equilibrium value is going to be around that figure.
Ugodree.
There's something.
I do not think Dr. Teriba agrees with Ugodree.
There's something funny about Nigeria, though. I mean, like, we want to know the true value of our currency, and if you ask anybody here, what's the true value of the Naira? What's the value of the Naira? What would you do? You'd probably pick up your phone, call an aboki, and ask him, how much be Naira? And then he tells you, that's the true value of Naira. I mean, regardless of where you are, private sector, public sector, you invest millions or billions, That's what you're tracking, right? You're probably not looking at the CBN. And it's even more instructive that this small segment of the market, right, as small as it is basically controlling the entire economy. Every single person, even the president, I'm sure, finds out what the value of the Naira is from the streets. So if you're asking me what the value of the Naira is, I called my bookie yesterday. He said it's 250 as far as he's concerned, even though he bought at 360, but he thinks it's 250. So to me, that's the value of the Naira. Till we control that segment.
I want to thank Dr. Ayo Teriba, Damilola and Ugodree for joining us in the studio. A very interesting conversation. You've heard it. The issues aren't actually to be for us to focus on the value of the Naira. It's to focus on the entire economy as a whole and fix the structural inefficiencies of it. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. So we hope these ideas can serve as cues for the government and we can begin to see real changes going forward. I've been speaking with Dr. Ayo Teriba, Economic Associate CEO, Ugodree Obi-Chukwu, publisher of Nairametrics and an economist, and we've also been speaking with Damilola Akinbami, Financial Derivatives Economist. They have been talking about solutions that can shape Nigeria's economy going forward. We'll be going on a short break, and when we return, ADEGBOYEGA will be taking us on a short interlude, a skit maybe, into Urbanomics. Do stay with us. Now, just before we go, and still very related to the Naira, we just have to touch on a couple of things. Now, a couple of days ago, the Naira strengthened to as low as 280 Naira against the dollar at the parallel market. And I could not believe some of the things being put out on social media, especially being related to billionaire businessman Ifeanyi, who had said that he could fix the value of the Naira and bring it to as low as 200 Naira in 30 days. Even putting up some of his assets as a collateral to say if he doesn't do it, they could seize the assets. Now, the question is, can he single-handedly bring down the value of the Naira? ADEGBOYEGA will be running us through that, and then we'll be rounding off. ADEGBOYEGA, do talk us through this.
TUNJI, now, first and foremost, I don't think any sole individual can actually bring about a change between the gap between the parallel and the Forex market. Now, the major issue you've actually had, it is a demand and supply issue solely. Now, whether that demand is artificial or not, it doesn't matter. The fact still remains is as long as it is effective demand, that is demand backed by cash, you would always have a spike. Now, what we've seen over the past few months, Forex demand has gone from 2 billion, it ranges in between 2 billion and 5 billion. Now, if you look at it, right, 15% of that is school fees and medical tourism, according to the CBN. Now, remember, 2 weeks ago, there was a bankers committee meeting. That basically said that they're going to add, quote and unquote, school fees and medical tourism to that prohibition list. Now, that's about 750. If you use a low of 2 billion and use a high of about 5 billion, that's about 300 million US dollars that is going to demand that enters this market. So unfortunately, that was why we saw this spike here. Now, at some point, whether there was some intervention, whether from what we gather, unconfirmed reports said there were cash calls, oil companies sold dollars, we don't know what it was exactly, but there was supply. And it had absolutely nothing to do with any statements attributed to the billionaire businessman. There was supply. Now, that supply obviously induced panic selling. So when it peaked at 400, somebody sold. Now imagine selling $100 million at 400 Naira and buying the same thing. You crash into here. Now you buy the same thing back and the price spikes again. Now the challenge you have is you have not fixed the issues. So whether there was an intervention, as long as you haven't fixed this huge unmet Forex demand, it's still going to go back up at some point. Now coming to my further point. Now, the thing is, for us to fix the supply issue, it borders on what? Reserves. The only way we can fix that is reserves. Now, your reserves have dropped by about 12% since July last year. They're not going up. The only way your Forex reserves will go up is if your crude oil price goes up. Now, your benchmark price is 38. It's currently trading at 35. So that means your accretion to your reserves is low or minimum at best, right?
So Gboyega, are you trying to say that billionaire Fayuba had nothing to do...
Absolutely nothing to do with it.
Because, I mean, people are beginning to call for him to be the CBN governor.
No, absolutely nothing to do with it. Because the fact still remains that if you don't fix the supply issues, if you had a war chest of, let's say, $50 billion US in your reserves, and you say, okay, you know what, because it's a supply issue, let's supply $2 billion or $5 billion on that unmet demand. Guess what? This differential would spiral downwards. But because you have 27 billion and you look at it, if you do this unmet demand of 5 billion, you do it 3 times, this is done. You know, so it has absolutely nothing to do with comments attributed to him.
Now, of course, Btva will continue to watch the economy and financial space in Nigeria, providing analysis that can in turn shape your business decisions. I am TUNJI Andrews, and from the team and I, keep doing business, Nigeria. I mean, the fact is that